Hi.
Hi, did it work? Am I on
It
it?
works.
Okay, I've
I know, I
never.
get nervous
Oh,
every
now,
time.
I framed the book so carefully, and now you can't see it. Hold on,
I
see if
have
we
my
can get
copy
it.
ready that I can put in front of my face to
How
show
about
everyone
that?
too.
No, can't see that at all. All right, well, here it
That's
is.
okay. Amazing. So hi Kate, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to talk to you today because I'm a huge fan of your book.
Oh my God.
It's
Well, I never tire of hearing
amazing.
that.
Yeah. Especially since it's out tomorrow, right? Tomorrow's the big pub day.
Yeah, tomorrow's pub day. So in the Jewish faith, we refer to this as Erev Pub Day.
Amazing. I love that. Well, I'm a big fan, as I've said, but for those of you who are tuning in who haven't read the book, Kate, do you want to give us a little bit of a summary?
Sure. So One to Watch is a romantic comedy. It's about a plus-size blogger named B. Schumacher who gets chosen to star in her favorite dating reality show, which is called Main Squeeze, but it might remind you a little bit of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. So B's in this total fantasy world on television with 25 men vying for her affections, but just like one little problem is that she's getting over this massively broken heart and she absolutely refuses to fall in love. So we'll see how that goes for her.
It is such a fun rom-com, I have to say. I highly recommend the book. And so, Kate, what inspired you to write this rom-com?
Yeah, so I got the idea for One to Watch in early 2017. And I was a writer for Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2015 and 2016. And after that election, I was like, wow, I feel very sad all the time. And I was looking for, anything to sort of bring a little joy to my life. And one thing that's always been for me is reality TV and watching The Bachelor. And so that was Nick Viall's season of The Bachelor. And it was March of 2017. I was sitting on my couch watching the season finale of that season. And this idea just hit me like a bolt of thunder. Like, we've never seen a plus size person lead a show like this. And what would that look like? What would it be like? And I was so captivated by this idea. I stayed up until 2 a.m. that night, writing just like a little proposal for my book agent, who the next morning was like, you have to write this because I have to read it. And I sat down that weekend and wrote the first chapter. And just ever since, it's been pretty great.
Well, I'm so glad that you wrote it. And I love Bea as a character. I feel like I haven't read someone like her in fiction in a really long time, if ever. How did she come to you, and how did you kind of write and develop her as a character?
Yeah, well, with any character, I think you want to be creating someone who's going to grow the most and change the most from whatever experience that they're going to be going through. So for someone who's going on reality TV, I was really interested in this notion of B as, a really famous blogger and Instagram presence, someone who's really used to sort of parsing the version of herself that she presents to all of her followers versus who she is in real life. And maybe that's not always the same person, and maybe that's not always the healthiest thing for her. So, well, how can we make her learn that? We can magnify at times a cajillion by putting her on reality television with a camera crew following her every move. And so for someone who's maybe a little afraid to get really vulnerable in her romantic life, a little defensive, a little closed off, putting her in this situation where she feels like she can be in control, but she can't be in control because there are producers who are worried about their ratings, and there are men who are maybe not there for the right reasons. And even the ones who are there for the right reasons, they're dealing with their own, past issues and being on TV and everything else. So for me, the heart of B was always figuring out, why is she so afraid to be vulnerable, and how can I make her get over that fear with literally millions of people watching her.
And I feel like that concept comes through so well in your book, that idea of vulnerability, and how, all women really struggle with it, and how we kind of project differently on social media to kind of hide our insecurities. I found that incredibly relatable. And social media in the book in general was very interesting to me, that kind of role that it played. There are actual like transcripts from Twitter and other social media platforms. How did you kind of play with those different elements?
Yeah, so I knew right from the beginning that I really wanted to include like Twitter threads and Slack channels and blog posts and podcasts, in part because I have some expertise as a, I've worked as a digital strategist in the political world for more than 10 years now. And it was the notion of taking that kind of writing that I've done professionally for like presidential campaigns and doing it about a pretend reality show. That just seemed really fun to me. But I also thought it was a really accurate way to reflect the way that we consume this kind of media. And when you're watching a show like The Bachelor, you're not doing it in a vacuum, by yourself. You're listening to podcasts and reading blog posts and texting with your friends. And that's such an important idea to me to capture in terms of the way we consume media now, that there's this whole commentary culture that's sprung up. And then thinking about Bee's story and her journey, I was so interested in understanding, well, how would this look in a really public narrative versus how would Bee experience it as a person who's actually going through the thing that everyone is talking about. So it was really important to me to kind of show both sides of the coin.
Definitely. Well, for those of you who are just tuning in, this is Random House live with Kate Stayman-London, author of One to Watch. I also love this cover, by the way. It is amazing.
Oh my God, isn't it? Sarah Horgan did the cover and it is so beautiful. I love actually my, when we first got the cover, my stepmom surprised me. She had it framed and sent it to me. And so now it's hanging up in my living room. And like when I'm sitting on the couch watching reality TV, I can look up and be like, hi, Bee, how's it going?
I love that. Perfect.
My stepmom is the best. The book is actually dedicated to her.
How sweet. That's amazing. So another question that I have for you is about some of these love interests and how, I saw a question earlier in the feed too. How did you come up with some of those love interests? Did you do any dating research for them? Tell us about the men.
Yeah, I thought I would date 25 men at once, and that would be my process for, no, I'm kidding, of course. I actually, so in the beginning, when I was first sort of conceiving of all these characters, I sat on my living room floor with a pile of index cards, and I wrote down the different tropes from sort of The Bachelor and shows like it. And I was thinking about sort of like the younger guy, the virgin, the villain, the smug professor. I was thinking about all these different things that we've seen on these shows. And then as I was looking at the cards, I was like, okay, now how can I make this something you actually haven't seen before? How can I take this trope and subvert it? And then as that sort of gave me the sketches of the different characters, and then through the drafting process, it was, okay, now how can I figure out if this, exuberant younger guy is going to be different from the guys you've seen before in X, Y, or Z way. Now, who is he as a person? What's happened in his life? What brought him to this moment? Why would he go on this show? And then how is he going to interact with Bee? And what is their relationship going to look like as it develops? And so figuring that out, it gave me newfound appreciation for the people who produce these shows. I was trying to figure out like who gets a date and which chapter, and like how to balance the relationships and keep you in suspense over who is really the right guy for her, if any of them even are.
Yeah.
That was a challenge, but like so much fun.
So you can go produce one of the shows now that you've learned all the tricks.
Yeah, totally. That seems like a totally reasonable career shift for me to make with no experience whatsoever.
So without giving away any spoilers, did you always know how the book would end?
I did. I actually, a lot of the sort of key points of the plot were set from the very beginning and never changed throughout the writing. Although we did a couple of times, like there was one character that was supposed to have a secret girlfriend, and then that actually happened on that season of The Bachelorette, on Rachel's season of The Bachelorette in summer of 2017. So it was like, oh, well, can't use this. And like we would have to change it around. But no, the main points and the ending and who Bee was going to end up with, I always knew. But what changed for me actually during the drafting process was kind of the way I thought about the characters. And like there was one man who I originally conceived as like the villain of the book, but the more I wrote him, the more I kind of came to love him and understand him, and he became like a really nuanced character. And then the man who I thought was going to be kind of the hero and the happy ending, the more I got to know him, he was really flawed and sort of a messy person with a messy past. And so kind of one of the great joys for me was getting to know these characters and sort of shading in the sort of versions of their journey as they happened.
Yeah, they do sort of kind of shape shift throughout the book. I also sent a copy to my best friend, and she was texting me as she was reading it, and she was like, oh my gosh, I love so-and-so. And then she was like, wait,
Well, that's the kind of, as much as it's so much pressure for B to be leading this show, it's also pressure for all these men. They've never been on TV before. This is not, old hat for them. So thinking, you know, like there's one man who he comes across as really stilted and uptight on the various dates, and then they get to hometown dates and he seems like a totally different guy, because of course he's going to seem different when he's in his own element, the same way any of us would seem different. And that, again, playing into that same theme of what are you like when you're kind of on camera and presenting yourself to the world versus, obviously you guys are seeing my hair and my lipstick in a really different way than you might if I weren't on Instagram Live this morning, right? So even little things like that, although I'm both a Libra sun and Libra rising, so really what you see is what you get with me.
Great. Well, so for those of you who are just tuning in, this is Random House Live with Kate Stayman-London, author of One to Watch. And since our series is called Writer's Routine, Kate, do you want to tell us a little bit about your writer's routine?
Yeah, so I would say the most important part of my routine is waiting for the deadline to be creeping up, and then I panic completely, and then I really have to get the work done. So that's key for me as a lifelong procrastinator. But I really like to write in the morning. I like to sort of wake up, pour my iced coffee with oat milk because I live in Los Angeles, and go and sit at my desk first thing and kind of type until, I'm so hungry that I absolutely have to eat something. Then I eat a Cliff Bar and type some more. And music is really important to me. So there's actually, if you go to the Random House Spotify, I made a playlist for One to Watch of some of the songs I was listening to. So that's like, it's really, but also like if I'm writing like a really kind of sad or emotional scene, like I have a specific playlist of just sad Adele songs that I play for when I have to like really be crying when I'm writing something, or like if it's a little bit of a sexy scene, like some Lana Del Rey will be happening, or if it's like an empowering scene, then like we listen to some Lizzo. So that's really important to me to be like, and I'm always making playlists as I write to try and, sort of get me in the mood for the writing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you have any other tips for aspiring writers?
Yeah, so my favorite writing advice, Toni Morrison says, if there's a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written, you must write it. And Jordan Peele says another version of that, which is write your favorite movie you've never seen. And so I love that advice. And for me, the real thing is to write the story that won't stop bothering you. So, and you always know what it is, where if it's a week, if it's a month, if it's a year, there's a story that it is just, you try and write something else. You're like, well, what's the most commercial thing? What's this, that? But at the end of the day, the story that kind of won't stop bothering you is the story you have to tell. And my other advice would be like, you don't need a book contract to be a writer. You don't need a master's degree. You don't, if you see yourself as a writer and that's who you are and you know that, like, don't wait for someone else to confirm that that's who you are. Like, have the confidence to believe in yourself and tell the story that you have to tell, that you want to tell, because you deserve that opportunity in your life.
That's really great advice. We also had another audience question that asked how long it took you to write this novel.
A million gajillion years. No, it took, so I started working on it in March of 2017 and started writing the first draft, I guess, later that year. I spent the whole summer of 2017. So Random House bought the book on proposal in June of that year. And then I spent the summer traveling in Europe and I wrote this whole backstory of B and her biography and sort of went to different locations that I knew I wanted to write about in the book. And then in the fall, I wrote the first draft. And then I think the final draft was June of 2019. So about 2 years from start to finish to write the whole thing. And then a year of like copy edits and all that other fun stuff that happens in the lead up to
behind the scenes
stuff.
stuff.
Totally.
Amazing. There was another question asking, and I always blank when I'm asked this, so I hope that if you need to pass, that's fine too. But do you have any recommendations for other books that you've loved or have been reading recently?
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm always reading. I should have had my reader next to me so I could actually look at it and say the names of the books I'm reading. But I just started Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and it's so funny and so well written and sexy, and I'm in love. I'm just in like chapter 6 or something, but I'm in love with the romantic interest already. I'm very excited to see how that all progresses. I'm in the middle of Anna Kay by Jenny Lee, which is a retelling of Anna Karenina in sort of a Gossip Girl, Manhattan upper class student Jasmine's world, but also Anna is Korean American. So there are like some really interesting cultural sort of differences from the original novel, and looking at how culture plays a role in kind of that, you know, rich teens in Manhattan world. So I'm really loving that. And then I'm also right in the middle of I'm going to say that more clearly. Party of Two by Jasmine Guillory, who is one of my favorite authors. Actually, Jasmine very kindly, she blurbed one to watch, so you can see her blurb is on the cover right there. It's probably backwards, but if you look at it, you can see it. I love Jasmine, and Party of Two is about a lawyer and a senator, and so there's all this politics in it. So I feel like I'm like, Jasmine, you did it. You wrote a book just personally and especially for Kate. So I'm loving that one as well.
Amazing. And we touched on this a little bit, but someone else asked about how do you approach character development?
Yeah, so I start with kind of what are the sort of key points of who someone is, right? So sort of like the very sort of broad strokes overviews. And then the more I get to know them, the more I can kind of shade things in. And I really like to write like monologues from the perspective of a character, which probably comes from my first training was as a playwright. That's what I studied in undergrad, was playwriting. And the way I was taught to write was sort of to listen to what characters say and then write it down, which is a very sort of like a medium-ish kind of experience. So when I'm getting to know someone, and I'm doing this with some new characters right now, I like to I decide what I'm going to write about, and I sort of think in their heads and just like start typing as them and sort of come to understand their voices and what's important to them. And then, so that's like the first step. But then the second step is putting them in situations that are going to challenge them and seeing how they react, because I don't necessarily know going into it. And I'm sort of like, oh, if I put, you know, Luke in this situation, what's he going to say? And then sometimes they'll surprise me and I'm like, oh, you're more interesting than I thought. Or sometimes they'll just be like a little dull and I'm like, you're not quite there yet. Like, what do I need to do with you to make you a little more fun or a little more exciting or unexpected? So it's, you know, different with every character. And that's the nice thing about books of, you know, it takes a long time and it's a little bit of a marathon, but also you have that time to really get to know someone and to let them surprise you and bring them to life.
Did you have a favorite character in the book? I'm assuming B, but.
No, I mean, I love B. I adore B. But there's a character who is a 10-year-old boy named Linus, who is actually my favorite character in the book. He's really cool little kid. He's gender nonconforming. He's obsessed with fashion. And he is just like full of happiness and light and joy. And every time, you know, the book deals with some more serious themes of heartbreak and fat phobia and misogyny, right? And, you know, even though it's a fun rom-com, it could be emotionally a lot to write some of the scenes. And every time I wrote a scene with Linus, I would just have a gigantic smile on my face from start to finish. So he was my favorite to write.
I loved him too. He was great. And that's a bit up for our time today, but it was so wonderful to talk to you. I love the book. I hope that you all watch and go buy it. One to watch. Woo-hoo! On sale tomorrow. Exciting. Well, congratulations on the book, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.